Town and Province is made possible by a local journalism initiative grant from the Community Radio Fund of Canada, a program supporting the creation of original civic journalism through Heritage Canada.
I'm Vicki Hogarth and welcome to Town and Province. Today I'm joined by the Mayor of Grand Manan on Grand Manan, Bonnie Morse. Thank you, Bonnie, so much for having me at the Village Council Chambers today. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for coming to the island. We always like it when you come over for a visit.
I do love a visit to the island, and you know what? It's even more special in the off-season because it's just a lot of islanders. I got to see a lot of familiar faces, and actually to kick off our trip to the island today, we were on the ferry with the new fire truck for Grand Manan. So tell us a little bit about the long wait for this fire truck and why it's so significant. I know a lot of people followed the drought from the end of summer and that impact on the island.
For sure. So the fire truck has been in the works for probably 18 months to 2 years. Just because it's a whole process to order a fire truck, it's not like you can pull up to the car lot and say, I'd like this one over here, please. And for us in particular, we have very specific size that the fire truck can be to fit in our fire hall, because that's always, you don't want to end up with a fire truck and discover it doesn't fit in the door. So it was very exciting to see it arrive. There's a good group of firemen that were there to see it. They had their training this afternoon. We replace our fire trucks here probably every 7 to 8 years. So we have 3 fire trucks that are in service all the time, and fire trucks have to be retired after 25 years. They're no longer considered firefighting apparatus. So this was our replacement, so we'll roll one in and roll one out. So it's a big day for the island. But looking back in the summer with the drought, with the lack of rain, because we really had no rain for the month of August and well into September and in the fall. Maybe to start, Grand Manan has no municipal water, so people here are on wells. And so people with drilled wells tended to not have issues, but people with dug wells, it was a long summer for them. And so one of the things we started talking about even back in the spring, because we were seeing more people were starting to have issues, is we're looking to do a water study. We have an application in for funding to determine where the Grand Manan's water supply does come from. Unlike the mainland, what rainwater falls on Grand Manan is really where our groundwater comes from. We're not being fed by any rivers, from somewhere else. So is there a way to increase the capacity of what we do have for wetlands? Is it better if there's an area that's experiencing drought? What if instead of a wetland, what if we could make a pond, do something like that, so that the water is retained longer and has longer to be absorbed into the ground versus evaporating? So that's really what we're looking to start, is to identify where the problem spots are, and then see what maybe the next steps could be. I think it's a scary thing to not have water. And so, hopefully we'll be able to be in a better place in the years to come to, combat some of those issues.
Were you surprised to see that issue make national headlines? I believe I saw it on CBC, The National.
Yeah, anytime something on Little Grand Manan catches national attention, it's always a little surprising. But one of the I was really pleased when they did the story. One of the things they highlighted is with the elevated wildfire risk that was all across New Brunswick. We, being on Grand Manan, we have a limited number of firefighters. And so in the event something happened, we're on our own until, either a plane can come from the mainland or you're bringing in people by ferry, and a lot can happen in that time period while you're waiting. And so for us, it's even more critical to catch the fire early. So we had people who were doing volunteer drone operations. So they would send their drones up a couple times a day and send out a notice, say, oh, didn't see smoke, everything's good. And we actually had a 911 call. Somebody reported smoke. They couldn't find it until they sent the drone up. And we're actually able to locate the fire and address it quickly. So it was a real community effort this summer on the wildfire front. And, you know, hopefully it's not one we have to replicate this year.
Speaking of ferries, I saw the fire truck on the ferry, but there might be need for a replacement of the Grand Manan Adventure in the years ahead. Tell us a little bit about what the status is of the two ferries, the Grand Manan V and the Adventure, and what could that mean in the years ahead?
Sure. So the Grand Manan V started service here in 1990, so it is 36 years old. The Grand Manan Adventure is 15 years old, so even our new ferry is getting some years on it. And the Grand Manan V, obviously being 36 years old, it needs either significant repairs or we need a replacement ferry for it. And more importantly, I think for the community as a whole, with both ferries, they just are not able to keep up with the demand for travel that we're seeing now. Our population has increased over the last, it had increased in the last census, and I expect it'll be up again in the census in 2026, which is a good thing, because that's what you want to see in rural communities in particular. You know, you see populations decrease, and so when you see that trend not happening, it's a good thing. We have businesses that are developing that are they're talking about bringing on an additional 50 workers. But that means 50 more people and potentially families that will also be requiring travel on the ferry, to say nothing of the product from the business that also needs to be shipped on the ferry. We're probably the only community in the province that our biggest barrier to development, either economic or social, is the province and is the fact that our ferry capacity just can't keep up with it. Nowhere else do they worry that, oh, I hope my road's big enough for this product or for these new people that are moving to town. But that's the situation that we're in here on Grand Manan. We have such a great group of volunteers, and I mean, sports is a really big thing here in the winter. I mean, you talk about it being the off season, and for Grand Manan, basketball and hockey and watching kids' sports is a really big deal for us. We have 11 basketball teams through the school system, plus another 5 hockey teams that are all playing actively, competitively on the mainland. But what that means is those teams are traveling. And so every weekend, it is almost impossible to get a ferry ticket if you haven't booked weeks out. People are we have a standby list for the ferry, and that's like up to 20 to 25 people for Saturday morning at 7:30 crossing, because there's so many teams that are traveling. There's so many studies that talk about, you know, the benefits of sports for youth and for activities and all those things. And doing that from Grand Manan is challenging, but the biggest barrier to sport shouldn't be the ability to travel off the island to go play those games. And that's what we're seeing more and more of. And until we have a replacement for the 5 that has a larger capacity, that can assume the winter runs that the Adventure is now doing, that's able to transport our lobster, our seafood, salmon, all of those things to market, as well as the people that live here, that's going to be what stifles the growth of our community going forward.
And I will say my high school basketball team was one of the most fundamental building blocks of me growing up, and I wouldn't change that for anything, so for sure.
Exactly, and I mean, we want our kids here to have those opportunities. And if people are considering moving to Grand Manan, that's one of the things they're looking for, like, can my child participate in activities? Are there things to do? And so, you know, to have all these volunteer parents who are stepping up that are coaching, we want to be able to continue those programs and to see those go forward. So, you know, hopefully we'll see some movement. We continue to work with the province. We have a working group that we meet several times a year. We talk about this, but we need to start seeing some movement and to see some progress going forward on what the replacement for the Grand Manan V is going to look like.
I know that they on Campobello are running into similar issues with teams not being able to get over, and it is having a big impact on the youth, so a very fair point to consider. I wanted to ask, one thing I love about small communities too is the camaraderie of all the different ages and the overlap of generations. But at the school here, there is, for the Olympic season, something exciting happening for the young people as well.
So the student council group has decorated the school. They're ready for the Olympics, and they've set up a TV in the cafeteria of the Great Hall. So during lunch breaks, students can go in and watch the Olympics and have Olympic watch parties. And so it's kind of a nice way to bring, the world to Grand Manan, and, to be able to participate in sort of those nation bonding experiences. I think everybody remembers where they were when Sidney Crosby scored the gold in Vancouver. And so to be able to do some of those things as a community, I think it's just a really cool thing that they're doing there at the school.
Another connection point from the island to the mainland has been the medevac getting back on the island, and the airport hangar introduction was a huge part of that. How's having that service back on the island? How much has it been used since it's been back installed, and how important has this been under your time as mayor here?
So the best thing I can say is we don't talk about it anymore because it's just working. And that to me is the ultimate sign of success, is that people don't think about it until they need it, and when they need it, it's there and available. We opened our hangar in the fall, October or November. Minister Dornan was over for that, and so now we have a place that the planes, it's available for the planes to be here. It's owned by the village, so regardless of who is providing the service, we know that we have a place for those planes to be based, which is critical for us through the winter particularly, and especially with all the snow we've had over the last month or so. I know the plane goes quite frequently. I can hear it when it comes and goes, but to know that it's able to leave the island when it's needed and to get back and they have a place to be, for us, that's really critical. Part of that, it wasn't really part of the air ambulance, but the village also, this past, probably about 3 years ago, we resurfaced the runway of the airport, and we are working towards extending the runway as well so that it will be more usable, I guess, maybe during times of the year, whether it's, during the summer or during the winter when there's wind, those sorts of things. It'll just make access to the island a little bit easier. So that's going through the environmental assessment. So we're hopeful that we'll have some word back on that, maybe even for the summer, but it's certainly in the years to come that we'll be able to move forward with that project.
And bringing us back to current work, how is the rural plan going? I know there was recently a hearing of objections from the community. I understand that flooding zone was a particular area of interest for residents.
So we released the rural plan late summer, early fall, and we had several open house comment sessions just for people to come in and do Q&As to ask questions, get some more answers. The flood zones were really a flashpoint, I think, for people. There was concerns, which I understand, given on being on an island, why those concerns were there. The challenge for the council is trying to, listen to those objections and respect them, because certainly we respect where people were coming from on that, but also to meet the requirements that the province has that have to be implemented by 2028. And so we did a revamp of the plan post those sessions, and that was what we had for comments at the 1st of January. We had released it online in December. It was addressed at the council meeting, and the Regional Service Commission, the planners there, did a really good presentation of what was in the plan and what the comments that we heard were and what the changes were that we made to the plan. And I think that listening to him step through that process, and I think the changes that were made, we heard much less as far as objections and concerns with this version of the plan. I don't think everybody's thrilled with it, but I think we've reached maybe a middle ground that hopefully it's more palatable for people. It's closer to maybe what the reality on the ground is, and still meets the requirements that we have to have in the plan. So I think it was, it was a bit challenging there at times through the fall, but I think we've ended up with a better product for it. So hopefully, going forward, that's what we'll have. We've done the second reading, and we'll do the third reading the end of the month and be through the rural plan process. The rural plan's always up for review. It can always be changed, but it gives us a guiding post and a place to start.
Change is a process, and speaking of change on the island, the recycling program is up and running. Tell us a little bit about how that's going.
Sure. So maybe I'll start with, for people on the mainland, Grand Manan doesn't have weekly garbage pickup. We have a transfer station where people still take their garbage, it's loaded in a trailer, and it's trucked off the island. So in May, we started our recycling program, which for the village is a way to divert some of that garbage so that we're no longer paying the trucking costs for that. And some of the tonnage is obviously coming out of the garbage. We've had really good uptake from citizens. People were excited about recycling, and that's one of the things we heard coming into this term, is that people wanted to start recycling. So we're averaging probably 15 to 1,800 pounds a month, which is not bad to start because paper and plastic doesn't weigh that much. Much higher in the summer when we had, summer residents here. So we're hoping it will continue to grow, but we're excited to see the plan come into fruition, and we're hoping that we'll be able to do a few more things going forward.
I do have to ask, and I can't believe I'm waiting till this late in the show to ask, because I'm sure it's on a lot of people's minds. Grand Manan was recently the subject of a still standing episode on CBC, which is huge to be picked for such an honor, to be spotlighted for half an hour. When you saw this come out, well, we sit down to do this, it just came out a matter of days ago. What was your impression of the episode, and what do you think it'll do for tourism overall?
So it's always very cool to see your community highlighted in a way like that. It's a little bit scary too, because you have to trust somebody to tell your story. But they did it in such a way that it was fun to watch. It was so fun to see people that laughing in the audience, being interviewed. And I think it was a really cool snapshot of Grand Manan, our history in the smoked herring industry, and how important that was to, the growing the island and developing who we are. The adults industry that is still vibrant and ongoing, and we're known, Grand Manan adults is a commodity in and of itself. And so, for people to see how that product makes it to their grocery store, that it was really interesting. And then just some of the fun things that happen. We talked about the population growth on the island. A big part of that has been people who are newcomers to Canada that have come to the island. So, to see the Holy Festival represented, and, to see how they've integrated into the island. And then to end with the classic of the greasy pole, because it's not Canada Day on Grand Manan if you haven't done the greasy pole. So it was just a really fun episode, and we're really hopeful that it gives people an idea of who we are, that while we're out here in the middle of the Bay of Fundy, we're still part of Canada and New Brunswick. We still have, it's a way to get away, but it's just a great place to visit.
Oh, there's something so special about an island too, and to make your point so real, I am meeting up with Lauren, the Dulce Man, right after this. So
very good. It's always good to talk about Grand Manan Dulce. Yeah.
I wanted to ask about a fundraiser I've been following here on the island for the Doucette family, for Rushton, who is receiving care over at IWK.
Yeah, so fundraising is still ongoing. There's actually an event this weekend as we're filming this, a bingo at the school. They're doing another fundraiser. It's always hard when a child is sick, and it's hard when you have to be away from home and away from family. And one of the things this community is really good about is rallying around people and rallying around our kids, especially when they need help. So it's just really great to see people, still continuing, after the initial diagnosis, we're still, as time goes on, that still is happening, and there's still that support that's there. We've had another child on the island who, on a completely different front, is also fundraising. She's part of a national dance team that's going to Ireland representing Canada. And so to go from Grand Manan to be represented at the national and international level is also a huge thing as well. So, Grand Manan is really good about supporting its people and supporting people who need that help. And so it's heartwarming to see this happen.
Well, if the Still Standing episode doesn't get even more people over here, I think when you see those kind of things on social media, it really warms your heart about how connected this island is, how tight the community is, whether it's summer, winter, fall.
Yeah, it's I think it's what makes this such a great place to live. And, you know, I think everybody thinks their community is the best, but I really think mine is, so.
Seafood is such a big industry, obviously, over on the island. As we hear of news of tariffs coming down, is that something that has an impact right now? How are people feeling about that with so many people tied to the fishing industry?
I think it's the unsettled market that I think has been the biggest concern for people, is just not knowing what the next thing is going to be. With the tariffs in China being lifted, I think that has helped, you know, the situation as well. But there's still that uncertainty with the U.S. market, and I think just that apprehension of not knowing what next week is going to bring makes it really hard for people to plan.
Yeah, I was going to say it must have a big role on the psyche of people who make most of their business off this industry.
Absolutely. When you talk to people who are selling, you know, to China or to the U.S., like it's a huge thing for them to, you know, not know what the next week is going to bring.
Mm-hmm. As you look ahead, I know there's municipal elections in May, but as you still look ahead for things on the horizon for the island, what are you most excited about?
So I'm obviously excited about the arrival of the fire truck. Excited about the expansion of the runway at the airport, because that's another big thing that, you know, to have happen here. We're in a pilot project with the province that we've not finalized to do the operation of the roads, which for a lot of communities, they've had a public works staff. For us, this has been a new thing for us the last couple of years, and we're hoping to finalize that and continue it long term. But part of that also is we need to have our roads resurfaced, and so we're hoping that there's going to be funding coming for that. We've talked about the ferry, having, you know, the ferry, a renewed ferry service, having a new ferry would be a huge thing to be working for this community going forward. And, you know, it didn't happen this term. We were hopeful that it would, but we had to close our pool during COVID. And the pool was built in 1967. It was a centennial project. And for a community of people who make their livelihood on the water, having a swimming pool isn't just a recreational thing, it's a safety thing for people to be able to swim. And so that's on our list, is still out there, is like, if there's a way we can figure out how to make this happen, I think there's a commitment to trying to do that. So it just is trying to balance those funds. You know, how do you balance the cost of a fire truck that has doubled in price in 8 years with all these other things that have to happen too? So, you know, hopefully we'll be able to manage to continue to balance those things, and we'll see good things for the community.
I'm not asking anyone if they are running yet. Municipal elections are still months away. They're on the horizon, but nevertheless, it's a great time to look back at this term and just say, what are some of the things that in this last term you're most proud of that you've been able to establish for the island?
So it's been almost 5 years, and I think it would have been impossible to predict some of the challenges that we've had over the 5 years. It wasn't what any of us thought we were going to have coming into it. You know, one of the biggest challenges was the bank closure that we had, and so to get through that, but then to see from that the Coast Health Services develop down in that building. And so we now have services that are available for people on the island that they couldn't access before. I'm proud to see that happen. I wish we still had a bank, but if we can't have a bank, then it's good to have other things as part of that. We didn't see the disruption in air ambulance coming, but to get through that, to have the service reestablished, to have the hangar owned by the village and have that security going forward, that's a big thing for this community as well. We took over operation of the transfer station. It had been operated by a private contractor. That expired. The prices were very high, so the village decided to operate it on its own, and we've done that for the last 3 years, and we're operating at a cost that is less than what it was costing us at the same level of service, plus we've added the recycling program. That to me is a big accomplishment as well. I've talked about the road crew and starting that contract with DTI and taking over that operation. We have expanded, you know, some of the assets that we've had that we've been able to put towards that, so we have better services there. That's a big thing, and hopefully be able to continue that going forward. Those are some of, I think, the big things that we've done, and I know I'm forgetting something that off the top of my head I'm not remembering, but those are some big challenges that we've had that I think, as a community, we've risen to meet them, and hopefully we'll continue to do that going forward.
And you throw in that you navigated that in a pandemic and now a trade war. It has been a lot, but nevertheless, it has been fun for us to watch. And I look forward to sitting down with you again soon, Bonnie. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
My guest today has been the Mayor of Grand Manan, Bonnie Morse. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Town and Province.